With the official announcement of both Warhammer 40k and The Lord of the Rings making their way into the MTG multiverse, we can't help but start dreaming about other crossovers we'd like to see. It seems as though the sky is the limit now too, because while The Lord of the Rings certainly fits, it's still hard to imagine a Space Marine on an MTG card. Then again, we did recently have Godzilla and friends around, so we reckon anything goes here. We tried to keep this list to things that mostly make some sense. That means that while we'd love to talk about how Adventure Time would be a great fit in MTG, we've decided against it. Some of these are definitely more likely than others, but if any of these came true, there'd be a huge swathe of people who would be overjoyed. Of course, there'd also be a bunch of people angry about it, but you can't please everyone. So here are the Magic the Gathering crossovers we want to see at some point. Blade Runner. Blade Runner is quintessentially cyberpunk. It's a world filled with androids, cybernetic enhancements, questions about what it means to be human, and bright colors. It's also regarded as one of those classic films that everyone needs to see at least once in their lifetime. Whether or not you actually want to watch it is up to you, but there's no denying that it would be a cool crossover. Even if you're not keen on the idea of Blade Runner as an example here, a cyberpunk MTG world would be great. The idea of having altered humanoids, digital warfare, and armed blades is cool. It's also not as absurd as you'd think when you consider characters like Tezzeret, who is undeniably a little bit cyberpunk already. Star Trek. Sticking with the science fiction vibe, how about a Star Trek crossover? Space, the final frontier, would fit quite well into the messy multiverse of MTG. Star Trek is already filled with different races, all of whom have different strengths and weaknesses. Plus, it has plenty of cool weapons to turn into equipment as well. That's not even factoring in Q, who has control over time and space in an undeniably godlike way. In fact, given that he's an extra-dimensional being, it's not even unreasonable to think of him as being something akin to an Eldrazi. Sure, he's not quite as tentacly, but the whole Eldritch knowledge thing is very much a part of his existence. Marvel and DC. We've grouped these two together because to write about one is to assume the other. Having a bunch of superheroes running around would certainly keep things interesting. A lot of the Planeswalkers already fit into this kind of idea anyway. What with Gideon being invulnerable, well, he was. Chandra being able to control fire, and Jace being a fairly decent version of the kind of thing that Loki can do. In both universes, basically anything is possible, so both of them would fit quite well into the MTG lore. We've got no idea what colors all the superheroes would be, but that's all part of the fun of imagining it. That being said, we're certain that Superman would be a goody two-shoes white character. Blah. My Hero Academia. While we're on the subject of superheroes, it would be incredible to see some modern-day anime making its way into MTG. While there are plenty of options to choose from, Jujutsu Kaisen, for example, My Hero Academia has some of the most vibrant and fascinating characters and lore around. Just imagine a plane filled to the brim with people who begun to awaken to new powers, and the ways in which that can be translated into MTG mechanically. We'd love to see a level-up mechanic in this kind of set, with characters becoming increasingly powerful and more absurd the more you're willing to sink into them. Dragon Ball. Moving on to our second anime pick, and we've gone with Dragon Ball to represent the old-school anime titans. This is another series that features space travel, but while Star Trek sets phases to stun, Dragon Ball just punches planets in half on the regular. We've got multiple races here too, which would make for some fun tribal cards with the likes of Saiyans, Namekians, and whatever the hell Krillin is really. We could also do with having Shenron as another 5-color dragon, because Lord knows we always need more big old dragons in MTG. Avatar: The Last Airbender. When you've got as clear divisions as earth, fire, water and air, it's very easy to put Avatar, one of the best cartoons of all time, into an MTG set and just call it done. It would be interesting to see which colors would end up with which skills, although it's pretty obvious where fire and earth would land. You've even got things like bloodbending, which fit into black with ease, and the fact that lots of people are just incredibly good at martial arts, which would fit in white. There are some incredibly cool creatures in this world too. Just imagine how fun it would be to have an APA card. Final Fantasy. We're venturing out of TV shows and into gaming now. The first up we have Final Fantasy. Now, the Final Fantasy series has always had themes from both high fantasy and science fiction. You just have to look at something like Magitech Walkers to see how it fuses both of these together. While we'd love to see one specific game moved over into MTG, it would be even better to see the entire series incorporated in some way. We've seen this in video game form with things like Dissidia and World of Final Fantasy, but it would be rather exhilarating to see Squall and Cloud teaming up to take on Ulamog. The Legend of Zelda. Obviously, we want to see whether or not Ganon can beat up Yugen. That's enough of a reason on its own. But there's no denying the fact that the Zelda lore would slot in nicely thanks to its use of so many fantasy tropes. You could easily have all of the Hoblins be a goblin subtype, and suddenly Krenko has a bunch of new friends to play with. It's not just that either, given that sparks often awaken under great duress, and the Triforce allows for superhuman acts. It's easy to envision Zelda, Link, and Ganon as 3 new planeswalkers. Their story isn't all that dissimilar to the MTG story anyway, given that Ganon is always scheming and occasionally turns into a pig. That probably happened to Nicol Bolas at some point in time. The Elder Scrolls. Dragons, elves, dwarves, magic, mystery, murder. The Elder Scrolls even has demonic lords, thanks to the Daedra. And there are very few properties that feel like they'd be a natural part of the multiverse than the Elder Scrolls. It makes so much sense that actually thinking about it even for a fraction of a second just makes sense. And it's certainly not a great flex to envision the two crossing over. In fact, with this one, we'd even love to see MTG finding its way into the Elder Scrolls. It would be great to see a portal open up in the next game, only to have Ral Zarek step through it. Dark Souls. Finally, we have one that fits thanks to its fantasy stylings, but one that would be hard to do justice to in card form. We're not sure how you could replicate the feeling of playing a Dark Souls game in a card form, unless you just permanently took away a player's lands and left them drawing cards and completely unable to play them. Either that or make everything cost at least 10 mana. For the record, we'd also love to see Bloodborne as a crossover in MTG too, and the themes there would be almost perfect for what happened on Innistrad last time we were there. We'll just have to wait and see what happens when we revisit the plane this time around. So there are our crossovers we want to see in Magic the Gathering. Are there any that you'd like to see? Let us know in the comments, and follow us for more Magic the Gathering content.